You're a dog musher, the newest member of a 19th century Arctic expedition, a crew sent to chart the unknown, new lands, uncontacted tribes, anything to leave your mark in the history books. And as luck would have it, your team has already found something. Not a village, not a cave, but a mushroom. A mushroom that somehow grows in negative-degree temperatures all the way out here, in this frozen hellscape. The team leader is fascinated by the fungi, fascinated enough to try some. Eventually, you do too. At first, everything seems fine, but over time, something begins to shift. You become forgetful, even unsure how long you've been out here. Guideposts and landmarks begin repeating. You've been going in circles, and you're only just now realizing it. In desperation, you follow the reindeer, trusting their instincts to lead you across the sea ice. But they only lead you back to where you started. They're even going in circles. The nights feel long, or maybe short. Time doesn't move right anymore. Your dreams, your memories begin to blur. The line between hallucinations and reality fractures. The mushrooms, they show you things, memories you can't always place. Sometimes they're memories you don't recall living, other times events that shouldn't have happened but did. And worse, things that haven't happened yet. As days turn into weeks and weeks into months, your mind starts pulling apart at the seams. And it isn't just you, the others feel it too. The fear, the paranoia, the creeping certainty that no one, not even yourself, can be trusted. In a nutshell, this is the narrative that which gave Chase tells. Not through monsters or jump scares, but through desolate loneliness, fragmented time, and betrayal. All while your mind slowly decays. But, more horrifyingly, it's about something ancient, maybe even supernatural or eldritch, pulling the strings just beneath the ice. When the game begins, we're met with a fiery orb that grows brightly, and then fades to black. When the screen loads, we find ourselves standing in the middle of a snowy path, with no idea where we are or what's happening, as wind howls violently through the trees. And standing in front of us is an older man in thick snow gear, clearly signaling that we're in a deeply cold environment. He stares at us silently, as if waiting for our next move.
We should keep moving.
It's a subtle nudge, but we get the hint. Time to mount the dog sled.
Forgive my impatience. I have placed a lot of trust in you. Wish I didn't have to, but my hand is forced. Time will show if you're the right person for the job. It was a fortunate thing for both of us that I found you when I did. I can tell you're determined, willing to brave the cold when few others would. Your efforts will not go unnoticed. I think much will come of this. It is time for me to return, to finish the work I have started.
Although cryptic, these lines give us just enough to piece together a few things. First off, we're likely part of some kind of research expedition. The man speaking, presumably the expedition leader, seems to have run into problems he can't solve alone. And that's where we come in. The game suddenly jump cuts, forcing us to take control of the dog sled as it plummets down a hill. And having never steered this thing before,
keep steady.
We tip over.
What do I pay you for?
What's interesting about sledding in this game is just how detailed the controls are. There are dedicated buttons for leaning to one side or the other while descending hills or making sharp turns. Getting used to these controls is actually a bit tricky, or at least it was for me, because the tilt keys are right above the turn keys. so you may have to do a little finger gymnastics on your keyboard. But trust me, you'll get the hang of it pretty fast. I'm garbage at pretty much every game I touch, and I still managed. But with as many hours as I have in the game now, I'm basically the Grandmaster Yoda of dog sledding. Anyway, just a little further, the man says,
"The cabin should be close. If they're still here, we'll meet them soon."
And right as the ominous music starts to drone in the background, we spot it. A small cabin in the distance, obscured by snowfall. But just off to our left is what looks like a cross.
Do you think they'll make it? It does not matter. Our work is here now.
Who was that?
There is nothing for us here. This place will lead you astray if you let it. I would advise you to follow my guidance.
Did we just see ghosts? Or was that the past? Even the man saw them. And this definitely looks like a grave to me. But what's strange is how defensive the man got when we listened to the cross. It clearly made him uncomfortable. Hey dudes, so it's come to my attention that I'm actually AI, and for some reason my upload schedule doesn't reflect that. But anyway, hello, I'm Fuzzduff. It's nice to meet you, and I'm a real human being, so if you or I see anybody in the comments section accusing me of being AI, we have to reply to that person and just lambast them with personal attacks. I'm kidding, don't actually do that. But if you're enjoying the video, please like and subscribe. It would really mean a lot, for real. If you do, I'll like personally come to your house and give you a hug. You can also join the Discord server if you're interested. It's full of completely normal people, I promise. Oh, and if you notice the red blotches in my eyes, it's because I had LASIK surgery last week. I didn't want you guys thinking I had a contagious disease or anything like that. But anyway, bye! At any rate, we make our way to the cabin to reunite with the expedition team.
Hand me your lantern.
Suddenly, the game cuts again. This time, we're walking up a hill with no memory of how we got here. By now, the player is likely wondering what exactly is going on here. Why do we keep blacking out? Why are entire stretches of time missing?
Not much further. Remember that this is just the first step. All your efforts up to this point will be matched twofold, or worse. This is always the true test. One I have failed, again and again.
As these ominous words echo, a brilliant fireball blooms into our view, obscuring everything, until it slowly fades to black. The scene shifts again. Without a word, the man hands us a rifle, insinuating for us to shoot the reindeer, and so we take the shot.
Very well. You may be of some use after all.
As we approach the carcass, the man takes a swig from his flask. But out here, in this cold, it should be frozen, unless it isn't water. We then spot something strange protruding from the snow. A mushroom.
Almost ruined. Their behavior remains strange to me, though I understand it much better now.
Time skips again. Suddenly, we're alone, wandering through a dark, empty forest. Ironically, this gives us a moment to breathe and think. If that really was a mushroom, why would the man care if the reindeer almost ruined it? Is that what the team has been living off of? Reindeer and these strange fungi? And what did he mean by their behavior remains strange to me? Was he talking about the reindeer or something else? Another oddity is the fact that the mushroom was even growing out here in the first place. I mean, really? According to my research, that's incredibly rare. Not very many known species can survive sub-zero environments. And even those look nothing like this. None of them, for instance, have a green cap like the ones found in That Which Gave Chase. Alright, we have to stop here, because there's a big spoiler I have to drop on you. That way, when the time comes, you'll understand the weight of the situation. And I'll be honest, I made this discovery right before releasing this video, but it would be ludicrous not to include it. So here in a moment, we're gonna find more of these strange green mushrooms. But there's a dark secret behind them that the game never tells you. Even by the end, almost all players would be oblivious to this. And realistically, the developers might be the only ones to actually know this. However, luckily for you, I've been inhaling coffee and no-lifing this game for months trying to crack all of its mysteries, which has probably decreased my lifespan, but anyway. Using the plugin called Cinematic Unity Explorer allows you to use FreeCam and get really nice shots like the ones you've been seeing so far, but you most likely aren't too interested in that. What we're really here for is the feature that grants the ability to hover over items in the game and read the name it was assigned by the developers. And when done to these green mushrooms, this is the name that appears. Phalloid's food item. Death cap. The green mushroom the man was so worried about being trampled was a death cap. One of the most poisonous mushrooms in the world that can literally shut your liver and kidneys down. Now at this point in the story, you might still have an optimistic view. Maybe that's what the expedition was about, studying these mushrooms. After all, Amanita phalloides typically grows in temperate climates, not freezing tundras. So maybe that's the big discovery, a cold adapted variant of death cap. And well, without spoiling anything any further, I'll just say that isn't the case. There are far more sinister intentions behind the man's actions that will all make sense by the end. But it's important to remember the man picked Death Cap and took it with him. And for now, I'll just leave it at that. Oh, and there's even more. Interestingly, we cannot eat the mushrooms. We can only pick them. And there are plenty scattered around the woods. Something that's quite alarming is that the reindeer will actually become hostile and attack you. At first, I thought it was just because I was holding a mushroom, but I pulled out my lantern instead and they still went after me. That's not normal. Reindeer typically avoid humans. They don't attack unprovoked. I then learned you can actually throw the mushrooms on the ground, and the reindeer will immediately stop attacking you and begin eating the discarded mushrooms. And here's the really weird part. Once you have 0 mushrooms in your inventory, the reindeer stop being aggressive altogether. They'll even run away if you approach them. So this is our first clue that something isn't quite right about these mushrooms. Are they really that nutrient dense that it makes the reindeer feral? Never mind that they're poisonous. Or is there something much deeper going on? Now, here in just a second, we're gonna get hit with another time skip. But before that, there's something I need to point out about this forest. During one of my playthroughs, I stumbled upon this. A red mushroom with white dots. And you're probably thinking, okay, Fuzzduff, who cares? Isn't this whole damn game about mushrooms anyway? And you'd be right, but here's the thing. Unlike our green phalloid mushroom over here, this one actually exists in real life. It's called Amanita muscaria, also known as fly agaric. Most of you probably know it from this small indie game called Mario. Now, what's interesting is since the footage you're seeing, I have not been able to make this mushroom reappear. I've tried everything. Ignoring all the green mushrooms, picking all 4 mushrooms in this spot, killing all the reindeer, not killing all the reindeer, feeding the reindeer, you get the point. And yet, nothing. Which leads me to believe this mushroom was placed here as an intentional Easter egg. Editor Fuzzduff here. So, yeah, it's just an Easter egg. In later sections of the game, we have some opportunities to find more of these. But as it turns out, there's a few more variants, including Stropharia aeruginosa and Stropharia hornimanii. Holy shit, dude, can these scientists relax with these names? Both have a sketchy edibility status, but aeruginosa is a controversial psychotropic. Controversial, as in people aren't really sure if it's actually a hallucinogen or not, although I find that to be quite dubious. I'm sure some psycho nut out there knows the answer to that question. Or maybe not if it killed them. But anywho, all the Easter egg mushrooms have one thing in common, and that's that they can't be picked up or held in your hand. they're just static items. Or at least right now, only one of them is unable to be picked up, as the Aeruginosa mushroom will play a huge role later in the game. What's pretty cool is that the reindeer will actually scratch around in the snow, and there's a small chance it'll spawn a mushroom. Then they'll proceed to eat it, which as you'll soon learn is pretty accurate and is something they often do in real life. Now, aside from probably being the most iconic mushroom in the world, Amanita muscaria has a fascinating history. There's a pretty compelling theory that the modern-day image of Santa Claus was actually inspired by this mushroom. To give you a quick rundown, I have to start off by saying Amanita is a powerful hallucinogen and highly toxic. If improperly prepared, it can cause intense nausea, vomiting, sweating, tremors, severe disorientation, and the list goes on. And it can last up to 8 hours. And no, I'm not going to pretend like I know how to prepare the mushroom for eating, so you'll have to seek that information elsewhere. This mushroom grows in various places around the world, but it's especially associated with Siberia, where it's been used by shamans for centuries to enter trance states and access what they believed was the spirit world. Now, here's where it gets weird. Some believe these shamans wore red and white garments, mirroring the mushroom's colors, and because winter snow could block doorways, they may have entered homes through the smoke hole or the chimney. They would sometimes carry dried mushrooms in sacks for spiritual or medicinal use, and some accounts suggest these were hung by the hearth to dry, even in socks. And yes, some stories even claim they traveled house to house on sleds pulled by reindeer. Starting to sound familiar, huh? Reindeer themselves are obsessed with Amanita muscaria. They'll dig around in the snow just to find them. It's thought that the reindeer also like tripping on mushrooms. And oh boy, that they did. Some would fall to the ground and start twitching, and others would start running around and jumping wildly, while others would stare blankly off into space. Some researchers think this is where the idea of flying reindeer came from. I just find this whole theory fascinating. It makes a surprising amount of sense, especially when you realize how integral mushrooms were to early human cultures. Even old Christmas cards featured red mushrooms with white spots. Anyway, now that I've ruined your childhood, let's turn our attention back to Cave Chase. That said, our time in the forest isn't over. Strange fungi aside, something even more unsettling is waiting just ahead. Eventually, we'll stumble upon another cross, just like the one from earlier. Only this time, the ground beneath it looks disturbed, and the man is kneeling in front of it. Then, time skips again.
The path splits. We built these to serve as guideposts. You'll learn not to place much trust in your senses here, least of all, your memory.
Huh, so these are guideposts? Well, the other one we found sure looked like a grave to me, and he didn't mention any guideposts back then. Not to mention, if it was a guidepost, it's in possibly the worst location imaginable, tucked in a little nook at the base of a mountain. So honestly, this more or less confirms that the earlier one was a grave marker, and yet he hasn't mentioned anyone perishing on the expedition so far, which is strange. Also, what the hell did he mean by "don't trust your memory out here"? Is he just saying that with all the snow and the mountainous terrain, it's easy to get turned around? Or was he being literal? Because we're already experiencing random blackouts, time skips, and even possible hallucinations. Something that many people might not notice right away is just how realistic that which Cave Chase tries to be. For example, in this scene, you can hardly make out the ground from the sky. Everything blends together into this eerie white void. Look at the trees. Look at the reindeer. Some of them seem like they're floating. This is actually called a whiteout, an extremely dangerous weather phenomenon where you lose all sense of direction and can't even tell whether you're going uphill or downhill. Luckily, they're rare in warmer regions, but at the North and South Poles, they're frighteningly common. This location isn't as bad as some we'll see later on, but I figured it was worth pointing out to you guys. Back in the 19th century, when polar exploration was at its peak, whiteouts were especially deadly. Without radios, GPS, or proper gear, explorers relied on maps and compasses, which became almost useless in these conditions. Crews would often get disoriented, lost, and in many cases, die from exposure or hypothermia. That which Cave Chase captures that same frigid isolation perfectly. The way it pairs haunting music with a disorienting, whitewashed environment almost makes you feel like you're really out here, freezing, alone, and completely lost. This is probably a good time to point out this is one of the locations where you can spot the reindeer digging up some Easter egg mushrooms. And if you aren't paying close attention, you'll most likely never even notice. I mean, I've replayed the game all the way through at least around 20 times at this point, and I literally just found this out a few weeks ago. From here, the man will point out two different guideposts that show us which way to go, or at least they're visual landmarks that tell him which way to point us to.
It must be this way. I recall our first crossing, out on the great sea ice, with no landmarks to guide us, hearts unyielding in the face of endless struggle. I knew the way would reveal itself to us eventually.
It's a little unnerving how much faith he has in the process, and the confidence that everything will be okay.
Through here. Do you see? There's no need to worry. We persevere. We are rewarded.
All the guideposts that the man has led us to has two planks nailed to the top, unlike the grave markers we saw earlier, and none of these have triggered visions or hallucinations either. But if we turn around from the signposts and hike up the big hill that splits the path, we'll discover something very strange. Another gravesite, with aeruginosa mushrooms surrounding it.
We should cut out its tongue as well. The wretched things keep me up at night. You should be grateful. Without it, we would have all been lost.
Do you really think there's anything to learn from this?
Cut out its tongue? What could they possibly have been talking about? From context, it seems like they're referring to a reindeer, or possibly a sled dog? Earlier comments from the man suggest it's probably the reindeer, but that only raises more questions. Why mutilate it? And why thank it?
Empty. Here, your lantern. We should continue. This is no place for rest.
But wait a minute. This would be the place for rest. What the hell is he talking about? Venturing out into the night would spell suicide. Temperatures would have dropped dramatically.
You've gotten us this far, musher. When I first came through here, I understood so very little. Not unlike you. Perhaps it was vain ambition that first led me to go further than any of my companions deemed responsible. That lies in the past. I know what my purpose is. It is the journey itself that draws us. Give your life to the pursuit of one thing, and your hard work will be rewarded. This place is the Civ. Pass through, and you shall find all your imagined woes have been left behind. But know this. The ghosts that give chase through the grave will never leave your side, no matter how far you go.
We can then hear the soft crackle of a fire, and see the same glowing fireball we saw before.
When we first came through, as if dragged from a rope, so we asked them, "Do you wish to leave?"
What do you mean?
Have I told you what became of that deathless deer?
You have not.
My expedition was slipping through my fingers. We were being humiliated by the conditions, and all our efforts to chart a course were fruitless. Yet somehow, these stupid creatures were able to not just survive, but thrive.
Where the hell did he go?
You want to know what I think? I think you've gotten us lost, musher.
So, let's point out the elephant in the room here. I don't think it's dramatic to say, this guy's fucking crazy. Almost nothing he says makes any sense, and he speaks in riddles like some kind of Arctic Yoda. It's like he has zero self-awareness. He just keeps rambling without realizing how insane he actually sounds. To be fair though, the constant time skips aren't helping his case either. They're just muddying the already confusing waters of whatever the hell's going on out here. But from everything he said so far, it's pretty clear he has some kind of jealousy, or at the very least, a strong dislike for the reindeer. And he even insults them outright, which makes me think he might be the one who said they should cut out its tongue. And what's this about a deathless deer? Deathless as in immortal? Are all the reindeer in Gave Chase immortal? Or is there a particular reindeer he speaks of? Oh, and what about that line back at the cabin?
The ghosts that give chase through the grave will never leave your side, no matter how far you go.
What the hell did he mean by that? Was he talking about literal ghosts? The gravesite spirits? Or is it something more metaphorical? Now, the game doesn't tell us outright, but once we take off, reindeer will slowly begin to gather and run in the same direction, silently directing the player.
We were eager to study these animals, to learn how they could thrive in such an unforgiving place. We withheld one from its herd, 5 of us in tow of the deer, though we were not content in simply being led across. How did it know where to go? How did it chart its course? One said the animal could hear the faint beating of hooves across the ice, so we cut off its ears. Another proposed it could see the slightest indentations in the snow, and we took out its eyes. Yet, we emerged on the other side, and the creature was reunited with its herd, as if it knew things it could not have been taught or used sense we could not take from it. See, we persevere. If you ever doubt your decision to come here, think about where you were when I found you, what your life was. Here, your life will mean something. I have brought you here for a specific purpose. So listen closely.
Just as the man hooks us with his cryptic words, we're suddenly thrust into the middle of a reindeer stampede, giving us little time to process what he just said. If I'm being honest, I spent like 30 minutes on my first run just trying to get through this section, which is quite embarrassing to say the least.
Bruh.
I'm not looking to die today. Faster!
Once we make it across a natural bridge by the skin of our teeth, it collapses behind us, sending the herd tumbling down the mountainside. This gives us a chance to catch our breath, and more importantly, a moment to think about what the man just told us. Of course, he just confirmed that the vision we saw at the gravesite on the hill was in fact talking about mutilating a reindeer. But more interestingly, he said that despite all their efforts, despite taking its senses, The reindeer still knew where to go, which at this point should start giving you an idea of what might be going on here. We know that the reindeer love these green mushrooms, and somehow these mushrooms aren't just feeding them, they're guiding them, or influencing them, or something else entirely. And maybe that something is a mycelial network. We know in real life certain fungi form massive underground mycelial systems, essentially acting as neural networks across entire forests, sharing information between trees and even reacting to external stimuli. As a matter of fact, the largest organism on Earth isn't a blue whale or a redwood tree. It's a mycelial network made up of Armillaria ostiae, also known as the honey fungus, found in Oregon's Malheur National Forests, colloquially known as the humongous fungus. It spans over 3.5 square miles, or 5.4 kilometers for the rest of the world. And it's estimated to be around 8,650 years old. So, what if something similar is happening here? What if the mushrooms aren't just food? What if they're a part of some ancient communication system you have to tap into by consuming them? So maybe the reindeer aren't just eating them, maybe they're jacking into their psychic frequency. But on the other hand, wouldn't the man have figured this out? After all, he's been out here much longer than we have. The only glaring issue with this that's still unanswered is the fact that these mushrooms are even surviving out here. For this theory to be correct, that means the network is alive and thriving under a sheet of ice spanning for miles. Further along the forested path, we'll find another cabin. However, if we approach now, time will skip, and we'll be locked out of an important encounter. So instead, what we'll want to do is turn around and follow a faint pathway. This will lead us to the last grave marker in the game.
Hold your tongue. Things may look dark now, but he led us here, didn't he? How could he possibly have known?
This is easily one of the most cryptic lines in the entire game, but it only starts to make sense when pieced together with clues we'll uncover later. So for now, we'll put a pin in it and revisit it when we know more. As I mentioned earlier, returning to the cabin will trigger a time skip. But this time, the man isn't with us, and for the first time, we're able to go inside. To actually see anything, we'll need to pull out our lantern for light though. Unsurprisingly, the cabin appears abandoned, but strangely, most of the essentials for surviving out here have been left behind. There's firewood next to a stove, with a spout sitting on top. There are beds, and in the corner a sack of potatoes by the stove, which curiously hasn't spoiled. But it's also possible the potatoes have been frozen solid this whole time, although there is a stove right next to them. It doesn't take long to spot the scattered journals and loose pages, but most peculiarly, there's a setup of chemistry equipment on the desk, a microscope, a specimen jar containing a death cap, and what looks like some kind of distillation apparatus. From the looks of it, whoever was studying these mushrooms wasn't just observing them. They were boiling and processing them trying to extract something. Whether it was for nutritional, medicinal, or even stranger purposes, we don't really know. But distilling them? That's not exactly how you make mushroom soup. Is it possible that's what the man has been drinking from his flask the whole time? Maybe he's suffering from some kind of illness. Or maybe this is evidence that he does know about the possibility of a mycelial network connected to whatever this place is. The journal on the table reads, Entrance to the Eastern Site, March 18th, 1992. I am not sure what my purpose of writing could serve, but I find value in it. Perhaps it is just for my own sanity. Writing helps me recall, helps me separate my own thoughts and memories from theirs. This is, after all, what I'm paid to do. We have all settled into our roles rather well, albeit with one glaring exception. His accounts of the North made a great impact on me in my youth. So strong was the allure of the sections of the world map, still uncharted, that I found myself standing in port with all my belongings wrapped up in cloth. I have always considered myself a careful, logical person, yet there I was, willing to put everything on the line to be given the chance to return with an account of my own. The crew there assembled was a curious sight. Misplaced among 5 hardened expeditionists stood I, a failed writer, along with 2 artists, and of course the ill-fated young botanists. All handpicked by our great leader, a man whose name once carried some renown in certain circles. In his eyes, I saw the same light which shone so fiercely in the horizon, leading us to the first sight. I recall that my heart sank, for I knew that light would only ever lead us further into the gray. And the last page ends with a black void drawn on it. Was this supposed to represent the light? Actually, is that what we keep seeing every so often? Beneath the desk, there's a photo of the 6 expedition members with their dogs. Over by the bed is another sheet of paper that reads, "One thing is for certain, here we are completely at the mercy of the conditions. All attempts at crossing this thick mist on our own have failed, with neither water sky nor ice blink to guide us. We always end up right where we started. When the place chooses to give directions, we have no choice but to follow." So, there's a lot to unpack here, and of course, as always, even more questions to answer. Firstly, this is when the player learns that the year is either 1892 or sometime after. More importantly, we learn that there are 6 people on the expedition team, or were on the expedition team. While the author of the journal isn't identified, based on everything we've seen, it's kind of a no-brainer that the botanist is the same man who hired us. We already know that he cares deeply about the strange mushrooms that grow here, and the writer even describes him as being ill-fated, and that's just the last nail in the coffin. However, there's a small detail I'm sure you noticed. The author also described the botanist as being young. So what do all these puzzle pieces actually mean? Because the man we're traveling with is definitely not young. Judging by his appearance, he's easily in his 40s, maybe even older. So just how long have they really been out here? Another thing, we still haven't actually found anyone alive. And for those of you that remember, that was the original goal, right? To reunite with the crew? Instead, we keep stumbling across what are probably graves. And every time, the botanist seems deeply uncomfortable when we approach them. At this point, that detail is getting really hard to ignore, especially since he was pretty adamant that we'd find the group by now. Add that to all the cryptic dialogue, the time skips, and the fact that he's never once explained how the others died, or even if they died, it's starting to feel like he's deliberately keeping us in the dark. But why? What's his end goal? And if we do some basic math, 3 graves plus the botanist, that means half the expedition team was already dead before he even reached out for our help. The only possible counter-argument is that maybe the graves were made while he was away looking for a new musher, but that doesn't hold up. Not with how he reacted when we listened to the grave markers. He already knew. Lastly, the journal mentioned seeing a light in the leader's eyes. The same light shining on the horizon that led them to the first sight. Now, is that just poetic language? Or is there something deeper here? Because we've been seeing that light too, over and over again. This brings us to something else worth noting. The journal called this area the entrance to the site, implying they discovered something significant out here. But we're not ready to go down that rabbit hole just yet. But it's definitely worth remembering, because we'll be coming back to it. Once we decide to leave the cabin, we'll notice a note left on the door that reads,
"For the outsider, the one who is being led, we see you too."
Okay, so even after theorizing about this game for months and playing through a shit ton of times, this note left on the door still leaves me mystified. Because who the hell wrote it? The man? And who is we? Could one of the surviving crew members have written it? We also have to consider a so-called deathless deer the man mentioned earlier. Was he talking about the one they mutilated? Or was he referring to some kind of shape-shifting cryptid or entity out here? Something intelligent enough to leave us notes and guide us. But if that were the case, wouldn't the author of the journal have mentioned something like that? Furthermore, if a crew member didn't write it, that could only mean the man wrote it before he reached out for our help on the expedition. So some shit definitely isn't adding up. This will all be more clear later on. However, as I said, the way this mystery is laid out, it still leaves a bit of room for speculation. Anyway, before we take off, this is the perfect time to do the most important thing in the game. Pet all the sled dogs. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Who's a...
You better start paying attention. We are not safe here.
After the time skip, we cannot re-enter the cabin. It simply tells us there's no one here. Although you'll probably notice this isn't even the same cabin we just came out of.
We have no choice but to go further.
If the player hasn't already, it's only natural to start developing a growing distaste or even outright resentment for the botanists. The entire time we've been with him, he's either been lying to us or deliberately keeping us in the dark. Now, whether our protagonist actually realizes this is up for debate. Maybe he's just as aware as we are, or maybe not. But either way, he's stuck with the botanists. Trekking out into the gray alone would almost certainly mean death.
You may continue to retrace the steps that brought you here. They will never alter. Look, bring us to that signpost. This way. Do not worry. Here we are all bound to its grip. My body unable to move. My memories no longer my own. But I was able to reach you and be your guide. Now we are much the same. You've spent your whole life here. Just you and your dogs. An outsider. I know what that's like. When we arrived, we were outsiders to this place, a cause of imbalance, but it took a liking to us. As long as I am needed, I am unable to leave. Now gone is the fear and the doubt. All paths have been revealed to me, yours and mine. My task is reduced to something so simple: to follow.
The glowing orb returns, floating dead center in our vision, as we walk into a giant mushroom patch. Mushrooms way bigger than anything we've seen before. Alright, let's pause here for a second, because the game is throwing a lot at us right now. First off, there's something I needed to keep in mind for later. While using Cinematic Unity Explorer, I discovered that this area actually ends at a hidden cave entrance, tucked at the dead end of this mountain pass. But here's the thing. No matter how fast I ran, and even with my in-game brightness cranked all the way up, the cave is completely invisible. The only way I was able to see it at all was by literally breaking the game. And I haven't seen anyone talk about this. No Reddit threads, no YouTube videos, nothing. So unless I somehow missed something big, I think this might be a pretty unknown detail. Now, could this be a scrapped area or reused asset? Maybe, but I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss it. Just hang on to this because it might explain a few things later on. Let's keep going.
In viewing the events that led up to this moment, understand that I have been asked to play the part of the opposer, standing not in the way, but alongside it, who by ingesting poison let rot set in and replaced old flesh with new.
The botanist then offers us mushrooms to take, but not just any ordinary mushrooms. In his right hand, he's holding Stropharia, and in the left hand, outstretched for us, is Deathcap, likely the ones he picked at the beginning of the game. The only option we have is to oblige.
I could tell you that I planned for this course of events to take place, but I know better than that now. Not unlike you, I am a victim of circumstance. Do not ask me to reason. The reasoning of your own mind may be as impenetrable to you as the reasoning of others. The sum of a half-remembered feeling and a long-forgotten dream. To you, I was a hand in the dark. A stranger, stood waiting in a forest. I took you in, trod the path you followed so effortlessly. Now, just as I brought you here, you will bring me out.
We then awaken inside a dark cave and find ourselves tied to a chair, with aeruginosa mushrooms either growing out of our arms or inserted into them. This leaves us no choice but to pull them out and eat them. After eating all 4 mushrooms, that same burning orb reappears at the center of our vision. We see memories flash before our eyes, revealing that this orb, or light, was somehow connected to these mushrooms all along. I'd wager he cut our arms so he could stuff mushrooms in them. Obviously, he's completely lost his mind. Or perhaps he lost it long ago. But what the hell is he trying to accomplish? Would these mushrooms have transformed us into something else? Or is he just batshit crazy? The first theory sounds crazy at first, but honestly, the way the botanist speaks about these mushrooms, it's almost as if he worships them. Like, they have some sort of hold on his mind. In the cave, we spot the same spoon lying on the ground from the cutscene just moments ago, which all but confirms our suspicion. The botanist was almost certainly distilling mushroom extract for consumption. Or more simply, he's been drinking straight psychoactive mushroom concentrate. And given that the spoon lies right beside our chair, it's obvious he had us drink the extract too. But we can't forget, just before that, he had us ingest mushrooms ourselves. Poisonous ones at that. So that still leaves the question, why did he drug us and leave us here? Were we not supposed to wake up? Something I didn't draw any attention to is the fact that when we woke up, our health was extremely low, and by consuming the mushrooms that were in our arms, we healed ourselves, which is very strange considering aeruginosa is a toxic mushroom. Now all of a sudden we're eating it like candy. It's almost like something changed, like we've achieved immunity to the toxins somehow. Resting atop a crate by the fire is a note that seems to have been left here for us to read. It has a drawing on it and a short message that reads,
Recall that on the outskirts of the borders of this place sits a small village, dug in among the pines.
That's where we came from, right? At the beginning of the game? Why would we need to recall that? Did he leave this here for us, or is this for himself? He's alluded several times that his memory isn't so great, but neither is ours. We've been jumping through time with huge gaps in memory, so it's not obvious who the note is for. Across from it is a stack of books, with another note that makes things more clear. It reads,
In my memory, I spoke to a young man there, convinced him to abandon his life and live like I did. He should be close now. I guide him as well as I can, and I hope you will do your part. You who recalls everything, remember this also. I brought them here. I am the one who should be allowed to leave.
Now it's unquestionable. He's talking about us. And it seems whatever fucked up ritual he was attempting on us has made us close to something. But before we go further, we have to address the elephant in the room. The botanist clearly believes he's in contact with some kind of entity, some intelligence behind the mushrooms, one that he thinks is guiding the reindeer. And based on earlier notes, it may be even influencing us, whether we realize it or not. You might be asking, why hasn't he told us any of this? Well, he kind of has. Or at least he tried to. He said that he's trapped here, that this thing, whatever it is, won't let him leave. But let's be honest, taking these things probably isn't doing anyone a favor. On the other hand, maybe the mushrooms were the only way he could communicate with whatever he's been speaking to. Either way, the influence isn't just from the mushrooms. There are hints all throughout the game that this entire region has a psychological effect. Something has been pulling the strings from the very start. And now the botanist's plan is finally in motion. According to him, we should be close now. Close to what? Taking his place? Because let's not forget, he told us this.
Now, just as I brought you here, You will bring me out.
So if he really is in contact with something, you have to wonder if it's even listening. Did they actually strike some kind of deal? Or is the botanist living in pure delusion? This could explain why he tried grafting mushrooms to our arms. Maybe he thought that's how he would replace himself with us. Aside from the 2 notes left by the botanist, there's nothing else of interest in the cave. Now the only lingering question is, where did the botanist go? Down the tunnel, we find a tipped-over lantern. Looks like our pal left in a hurry. The path leads us to an exit, but on our way, it's hard not to notice the suspenseful music droning in the background, like something really bad is about to happen. Upon exiting, we find that our sled and the dogs are gone. We're completely alone now, left to hike down the snowy hill on foot. But before we move on, let's turn around for a second. Doesn't this look familiar? If this is the same cave we entered before waking up in that nightmare sequence, then where did the mushrooms go? There are only 2 real possibilities here. Either this is a completely different cave, or we imagined the whole thing. A hallucination. A mushroom patch that never existed to begin with. Which is a pretty chilling thought, because if this wasn't real, what else have we imagined? And honestly, the second option might make more sense. We've been jumping through time, losing memories, and seeing strange apparitions since the beginning of the game. So who's to say what's real anymore? Please let me know what you think in the comments, because this next part only gets weirder. Soon after descending, we'll stumble upon runner marks in the snow, along with our dog's paw prints. These tracks eventually lead us to reindeer corpses lying on either side, giving us a pretty clear idea what happened when the man stole our sled and left us for dead. But this raises a bigger question. What exactly was the reindeer's motivation? Were they after the mushrooms he might have been carrying? Or was he simply shooting them? Eventually, the tracks vanish, with only the occasional mushroom poking up through the snow. So of course, the only logical course of action is to consume some and start tripping balls in the middle of a frozen wasteland. Okay, jokes aside, with each mushroom we eat, an apparition appears. The first one allows us to finally see the expedition team, with the botanist leading them. Immediately after, we spot a phantom using a sled, leaving us behind. And no matter how fast you chase them, they'll always outrun you. In the second vision, we witness a full-on stampede of reindeer, with the dog sled following close behind. And after eating our third mushroom, we'll eventually come across another set of sled tracks, leading into a pine forest, or more accurately, a taiga, which is similar to the one where we started at the very beginning of the game, and eerily similar to what that note in the cave described. Following the set of tracks will finally lead us to our sled, tipped over, with all our dog tracks trailing off in different directions and disappearing into the snow. Which means we'll have to try and find them if we want any shot at surviving out here. But this also means the botanist has to be nearby, and taking into account his current mental state, it's probably best that we don't run into him. Luckily, after some walking, we'll suddenly hear a dog howling in the distance, leading us to him. And then we'll hear another howl. So we'll make our way to it as well. Honestly, out of every scene in that which gave chase, this part was definitely the most unnerving for me. Walking slowly through the woods in search of our furry companions in a dim forest definitely wasn't the most pleasant experience, especially since the tree limbs are whipping in the wind, sometimes creating the illusion you heard someone stalking you. Once we make our way to the second dog, we'll find another cabin, with a mushroom growing just outside. Make sure to pick it, because what happens next will reveal a shocking truth about the botanists. The first thing we see once we enter the cabin is a man in complete darkness, sitting in a chair, and in one of the beds is another man that's been disemboweled. Taking a few steps forward reveals the man in the chair is dead as well. It's hard to say how long they've been dead, but there's no sign of decay yet. Then again, with temperatures this far below freezing, the bodies could have been preserved for quite a while. In the man's lap sits a Krag Jorgensen, the same rifle we've been using throughout the entire game. Is the name of the rifle imperative to this video? Absolutely not. Is the rifle cool as fucking shit? Absolutely. Now, with his head slumped backward and the gun across his legs, the obvious conclusion would be suicide. However, there's an important detail you'll notice if you pay attention to the man's arms. Text will appear, saying, "Knife incisions. Recent." But how recent exactly? And more importantly, were these men already dead before we left the cave? The answer is stabbed into the table right next to our potential victim. This knife. If you recall, it's the very same blade the botanist pulled on us just before kidnapping us and stuffing mushrooms into our arms, which means the botanist was just here, and we missed him. A strange detail that took a while to notice is that there's no blood in this cabin, not even around the disemboweled man. Neither is there a wound on the man in the chair, which weirdly makes this even more unsettling. Did the botanist stage a suicide? But before we jump to conclusions, there's a few more details worth investigating. But first, we should take the rifle, because we'll be needing it. On the table next to this man is more chemistry equipment, including another microscope and several jars containing fungal specimens. Some are still lying loose on the table, as if research was abruptly abandoned. So what exactly was he doing here? A piece of paper next to the mushrooms reads, Northern Site Variant A, which means there's variants of these hallucinogens? Also, notice how it says Northern Site. Meanwhile, in the last cabin, a journal referenced the entrance to the Eastern Site. So whatever's going on here, there must be multiple points of interest. Although, if I had to guess, the cave we escaped from was probably one of these sites. Specifically, the Eastern Site, since it looked a lot like the mountain pass that led us to the mushroom patch. But, on the other hand, this also gives us just a bit more credence to the idea that we didn't imagine the mushroom patch. While scanning the specimen jars, you'll likely spot another page on the floor. This one reads, Everything is kept safe from the noise of time, while showing what looks like the underside of a mushroom cap. Maybe the botanist was referring to the psychoactive compound, which is usually concentrated in the gills of the mushroom. Another page reads, After days lost in the mist, the ice blink led us here. How did we know to follow it? Know to follow what? The ice blink? During this time period, ice blinks were commonly used as navigational guides for polar explorers, especially when visibility was poor or when they were lost. Following one of these could sometimes lead to land, since ice blinks are an atmospheric phenomenon where light reflects off of large fields of ice, illuminating the clouds above and creating a glow on the horizon. But that glow doesn't always mean land. It could, just as easily, be reflecting off of pack ice. So wrapping back around to this entry, the statement actually does make sense. It even seems to line up with that earlier journal passage. In his eyes, I saw the same light, which shone so fiercely in the horizon, leading us to the first sight. Also, keep in mind, the author of that journal was the least experienced of the crew, basically green when they came out here, so it makes sense that he wouldn't outright call it an ice blink. However, as for the first entry on this page, that one doesn't make much sense to me. What were they following? And how did they know to follow it? And to make things more complicated, the image that accompanies this note is too blurry to make out. Is it mushroom related? Maybe a diagram of a mycelial network? Or is it something simpler, like a map? The page in the center, obviously written by the botanist, reads,
I have had so much time to think without arriving any closer to the truth. None of us are fully lost. We are still here, content with reliving the past through its eyes. It has shown me answers to questions long for. I no longer recall how to ask my own. He wishes to bring it out, to let it do there what it has done here. I don't know whether to stop him or help him. Let him rot in his cave. I prepare for one final journey and pray it leads me elsewhere, or nowhere at all. Not here.
It goes without saying, these are the writings of a troubled man. A man likely undergoing a complete psychotic break due to ingesting far too many psychoactive mushrooms. But what does he mean by, let him rot in his cave? Was he talking about us? Or some kind of entity? He couldn't have meant us because earlier he said he wishes to bring it out, to let it do there what it has done here. Which doesn't make any damn sense. It seems pretty clear that the botanist has gone completely insane. Before we leave the cabin to search for our other dogs, there are a few more details we need to talk about, and they might give us some serious clues as to what the hell's going on here. Over on the stove, we'll find more spoons filled with the same liquid the botanist likely had us ingest, and probably what's inside his flask too, which means he was likely boiling mushrooms for the extract. However, there's another strange clue that resides inside the stove. Antlers. Antlers inside the wood-burning stove. Now, I don't know about you, but antlers wouldn't exactly be my first choice for staying warm. Maybe they were desperate and freezing, right? Right. So since there's clearly a surplus of firewood and someone still decided to toss in antlers, it's pretty easy to start thinking, well, they were all tripping on hallucinogens that might have some kind of paranormal properties. Of course they thought antlers would burn. Duh! And honestly, that kind of makes sense. At this point, it's not a stretch to say these men were likely deep into full-blown delirium territory. Sure, it might be unfair to assume the entire expedition crew was taking mind-altering mushrooms, but why wouldn't the botanist pressure them the same way he pressured us? Anyway, you get the point. What I'm trying to say is there's a chance, just a chance, that they were burning antlers as some sort of crude, ritualistic offering. Some kind of sacrifice to whoever or whatever the botanist has been writing about. Still not convinced? Well, honestly, I'm not so sure if I am. But there's one last clue I've been purposefully ignoring, and to access it, we'll need to eat another mushroom. The first vision we see is of one person pouring the psychoactive substance into a spoon for another. Then we see a man sitting down, writing the main piece we read earlier. And then we see the botanists kneeling beside the man in the bunk, and we hear the sound of flesh being ripped and pulled apart. On closer inspection, it becomes disturbingly clear he's cannibalizing his team members' entrails. So now what? What's even left to say? If it wasn't clear before, it is now. He's gone completely off the deep end. The man is living in pure lunacy. He ate his crew member, and this obviously wasn't done out of starvation. For crying out loud, there were potatoes in a previous cabin he could have grabbed, not to mention the plethora of reindeer still wandering around. I'm sure he wouldn't mind killing a few more of those, am I right? So this was either some twisted alchemy ritual or the result of a full-scale psychotic break. And honestly, it was probably both. As the botanist lost his grip on reality and delusions began to set in, the desperation to leave this frozen nightmare likely pushed him over the edge. And this theory holds even more weight when you consider what he did to us, grafting mushrooms to our arms. He even tried the same thing with this poor fool. Coupled with his obsession over the reindeer, maybe this is what led him to try and burn the antlers. An act of desperation. A ritual. Maybe he thought it would release some kind of energy or essence. For example, in subarctic cultures, such as among the Sami of northern Scandinavia or the Evenki or Chukchi of Siberia, reindeer were seen as spiritual vessels, and antlers were regarded as sacred symbols of power. Given what this expedition team has experienced, it's possible they encountered shamanistic ideas, either directly or through passed down lore, and began to interpret the reindeer in a more mystical, symbolic way. This could also make more sense if we assume that which gave chase takes place somewhere in Siberia. Many theories about this game suggest it was inspired by Greenland-based expeditions, which could be true as inspiration. However, it's very unlikely the story actually takes place in Greenland. Considering the snowy birch and pine forests we found ourselves in earlier, this already creates major problems, because Greenland has no native coniferous trees whatsoever. The existence of a nearby village dug in among the pines would have been virtually impossible in 19th century Greenland. While a few experimental plantations were established in the 20th century, in the 19th century, pine and fir forests simply didn't exist in Greenland. Now, in fairness, Greenland does have birch trees, mainly downy birch in protected valleys of southern Greenland where they can grow a few meters tall, plus dwarf birch shrubs scattered across the tundra. But vast birch forests? That's Siberia, not Greenland. And then there's our little friend, Amanita muscaria, which prefers to grow beneath birch, pine, and fir trees. While the devs may have taken some liberties with which mushroom species appear in the game, the inclusion of Amanita muscaria alongside the reindeer symbolism and shamanistic themes points directly to Siberian cultural traditions, not Greenlandic ones. So, between the impossible pine forests, The shamanistic reindeer symbolism deeply rooted in Siberian cultures and the Amanita-Muscaria connection, every crumb of evidence points to Siberia. And the cherry on top of everything is that something more supernatural is going on behind these mushrooms. So there's no telling what other effects they've had on his psyche, and in turn, ours. After all, he made us ingest these things as well, and even the elixir from his flask. Yeah, sure, it's making us hallucinate, but we're also beginning to see the past through visions. It makes you wonder, is the botanist really about to get what he wants? Freedom from this nightmare? We may very well be taking his place, whether we like it or not. Before exiting the cabin, you'll likely notice one last piece of paper by the door. Curious that the task of mapping this place befell the botanist, who before this excursion had barely left the confines of his hometown. His drawings mean to resemble cartography. Surely whorls and tendrils are still on his mind. The borders swirl, stretching out across the impossible sea ice, connecting each grove in a wretched web. Every day he tries to perfect his distillations, hoping to be given some insight into some great truth. I am patient. I will continue to review his work. To me, it sounds like the author of this note is the so-called Great Leader, as the mysterious author from earlier in the game called him. Evident by the last statement, it sounds like for whatever reason, this leader recognized the young botanist's potential, maybe even his genius. But there it is again, young botanists. Nevertheless, it seems the expedition team may have even had faith in his theory about how the reindeer navigated a mycelial network. Also, I want to point out this line here. The borders swirl, stretching out across the impossible sea ice, connecting each grove in a wretched web. The only way the botanist could know that is if the mushrooms are showing him visions of the network itself. Once we leave the cabin, we'll hear another one of our dogs howling in the distance. And then, a gunshot, whizzing past us, striking a nearby tree. We have no choice but to run. While we sprint through the snow, dodging between trees, more gunshots ring out, each one getting closer. We're making our way toward the sound of our third dog, but the gunfire just won't stop. Then, in the distance, we hear our fourth and final dog. We make a beeline toward the sound. What's horrifying about this entire encounter is the creeping doubt. Are we really being shot at? Or is this just another hallucination brought on by the mushrooms we've taken? Can we even trust our own senses anymore? Eventually, we find our last dog waiting beside the sled. Once we reassemble the team, we can finally get the hell out of here. Our sled bursts forward into a whiteout. Visibility drops to nothing. We're riding across what looks like sea ice again. There's no clear path. So once again, we follow the reindeer just like we always have. And just as we think we've made our escape, a shot rings out, leaving us in our tracks. With our dogs vanishing into the snow, we're completely stranded, and the botanist is still out there, lurking somewhere in the whiteout. If we want any chance of surviving, we have to kill him, once and for all, before he kills us. Through the fog, we catch fleeting glimpses of the man, giving us only split-second windows to fire before he pulls the trigger. But there's a huge problem. We're still hallucinating. At times, we see multiple versions of him at once, and we're forced to figure out which one is real. If we hesitate or choose wrong, the bastard will charge straight at us with a knife. Sound cues warn us of an incoming attack, but if you're playing this alone in the dark, it's enough to make your skin crawl. After trading blows and burning through our dwindling supply of mushrooms just to stay alive, we finally drop him in the snow. A final shot. Silence. And after everything we've endured, the only choice the game gives us now is to take the botanist's flask and drink. We're now returned to the captain's seat, except this time, the botanist lies still, his head slumped backward. A haunting, yet strangely beautiful ending to a game like this. It makes you wish things had turned out differently, because despite everything, you actually end up feeling bad for the strange man. And if circumstances had been any different, you and he might have been good friends. We get our final time skips. But if we glance back, we can barely see the sun poking through the clouds. Something about it feels hopeful, but something else tells me this isn't exactly over. And that's the end. Ironically, even after covering a game like Scorn, That Which Gave Chase almost rivals it in terms of cryptic storytelling. It leans heavily on scrambled timelines and memory gaps, keeping you in the dark but slowly rewarding those that pay attention to all the little details. It feels intentional, like the devs wanted us to sift through what's been left behind. And if you think about it, we are that player, so let's do exactly that. Let's try to piece it all together and figure out what might really be going on here. Oh, and spoiler, I've got multiple theories as usual. So let's start off with a simple question. Who is this man? This question may seem pretty obvious at face value, but becomes pretty murky the more you dig into it. To show you what I mean, the journal toward the start of the game referred to him as the young, ill-fated botanists. However, the man we find easily looks 40, which raises the real question here. Who exactly have we been following this whole time? But let's pretend that journal entry doesn't exist for a moment, and just focus on the man himself. The confidence he carries throughout the game could certainly lead one to believe he's the leader of the group. And even in his own words,
"My expedition was slipping through my fingers. We were being humiliated by the conditions, and all our efforts to chart a course were fruitless."
So, there we have it. Why else would we question it any further? The botanist killed the other members and has been running in circles here for at least 20 years. But if that were the case, then wouldn't these bodies be skeletons at this point? As a matter of fact, it seems to be the opposite. They almost look fresh. So is it possible the actual expedition leader killed the botanists and just assumed his position as the mycelial oracle? Or has the botanist really been wandering this frozen wasteland for half his life, maybe even being preserved or kept alive by the very thing he was studying? Well, honestly, I don't really know for sure, although I'm more inclined to believe he's been here for a very long time. Plus, the name assigned to him is literally scientist. But I think I have a good explanation to explain the botanist's age. This might sound like a stretch, but have you ever stopped to think about how he kept the mushroom extract from freezing in his flask? It's believable for the mushrooms to be growing here, as there are species capable of such. But the fact that he consistently drinks from his flask throughout the game without even warming it tells me that it doesn't freeze. And how about the fact that the mushrooms literally make your health regenerate? They clearly have effects far beyond the regular mushroom. And we haven't even touched on the strange visions they give you. Rant aside, I think it's completely plausible that he and his team weren't just mentally unraveling, they were also being physically preserved by the mushrooms. And I'll even take it a step further. This could very well be the reason why the botanist put mushrooms inside our skin. It could have been a crude form of inoculation, exposing us to small amounts of toxins to build resistance. Similar to how vaccines work, in many shamanic traditions, controlled exposure to toxic substances was believed to confer protection or heightened abilities. Could that explain why the toxic Stropharia mushrooms are used to regain health? Perhaps we've been inoculated against their poison, allowing us to harness their medicinal properties that would otherwise be deadly. Now that that's been explained, or at least to the best of my ability, this leads us to the next big mystery. Who wrote the two main pages? The last one was almost certainly written by the botanists, but the first one was written as if there was a group spectating us, possibly even some otherworldly cryptid guiding us. I'll be straight with you and just flat out say the botanist most likely wrote it, due to his rapidly declining mental state. But assuming that's true, then that means the botanist planted this note here for us to find, which also means he did this before he even came to our village. Nevertheless, the strangeness of this note is worth pointing out regardless. Remember the story I offered earlier in the video about this page in particular? About there being a deathless deer? Well, I had a theory at one point, one I won't dwell on too much because I eventually debunked it, but for a while, I thought maybe we, the protagonists, were actually the antagonists. Perhaps we were some kind of relay or oracle, capable of channeling whatever power these mushrooms possess. It tied into ideas of broken timelines and parallel universes, you know, the kind of theory that starts sounding like a stretch the more you try and justify it. But anyway, I thought perhaps that was what the botanist was talking about when he told us about a deathless deer. I really thought that I was onto something and that this was an elaborate hint that the protagonist was the original villain all along. However, in retrospect, at least according to my own theory, deathless deer was probably referring to the reindeer that they experimented on. Maybe because of the mushrooms, it was healing from otherwise deadly wounds, such as having its eyes and ears removed. But then, I found evidence that outright shut down my protagonist is the actual villain theory, and that evidence isn't part of the main game. It's hidden within the game's assets. And I found it using Unity Explorer. Aside from 2 visible notes in the cave, there are 6 more pieces of texts, and they're not throwaway lines either. They're actual bombshells. They're essentially the Rosetta Stone of Gave Chase. But to be fair, a few of these are just slight variations of earlier passages, but with more interesting wording. Here's what we missed. We'll start over by the stack of books. Right on top, there's another book with black voids scribbled all over the pages. I feel like this is just a drawing of the glowing orb we've been seeing throughout the game. Maybe a subtle way to hint the members of the team went fully crazy. Maybe one of you guys in the comments section will have a spicier theory on that. But we aren't really here for the book, as underneath it is a note, and it reads,
"Submitting yourself completely to the rules of this place is to allow yourself to be confused. It is a wonderful experience I never want to be without again. Still, it is not without its dangers. I will have no use for this should I forget what motivated my work in the first place. Recall the company, their betrayal, their mockery. Recall the doubt, the struggle, the shame. Recall that I have not doomed my companions. From the day we began our travels, they knew the consequences."
This here is probably one of the more profound pieces, because when he said company, that could potentially mean he was rejected from a scientific institution or academic society. Or in other words, this turns the botanist's story into a tragic tale of rejection. Maybe the botanist felt he had to justify himself and prove something. Maybe that's the reason the original leader gave him the role as a navigator. Maybe the leader saw something in him. Either way, it reads like a defense, a final attempt to justify what's happened out here. Or this could simply be old-timey terminology, and he was just referring to his fellow explorers. Over by the crate, we'll find a book resting on a rock that reads,
"The valley as recalled from above. Was this where we first set out to cross? A village, the name of which I have forgotten or never known. In my memory, I spoke to a young man there, convinced him to abandon his life and live like I did. He who stumbles in my footsteps should be close now. You, who remembers everything, remember this also. I brought them here. I am the one who should be allowed to leave."
In this passage, he's clearly struggling to remember the order of events for the expedition, while also acknowledging the village we came from.
"I was wrong. There is value here, not just folklore and superstition. The valley as it was recently shown to me. After days in the crippling mists, the ice blink led us here. How did we know to follow it?"
The first line stands out the most, a full reversal of skepticism and a sign that he's now fully invested in whatever's been discovered out here, but still painting a picture of someone gradually losing their grip on reality. Now the final page below all the rest.
There's no leaving now. I can feel the veins pull as I move. I was a fool to think I was ever in control. Yet the trade was not one-sided. At night, my deathless body casts me out, and the place calls out, revealing. And you, whom I now see clearly. You will take my place here, and you will see as I do.
And just like that, after all the speculation from players and other YouTubers, this confirms it. The botanist's entire goal was to pass the curse, or the burden, onto the protagonists. I mean, he did literally say that while standing over us and holding a knife, but until now there was just enough ambiguity to fuel other theories. And I don't know if you caught it, but he more or less confirmed that these mushrooms preserve the body somehow, and he was just trying to find a way to escape. Still, not everything's been answered. We still don't know what these mushrooms actually are. Are they some kind of ancient alien organism? Eldritch? Sentient? And is the botanist really the botanist? Personally, I love when a game doesn't tie everything up in a neat little bow, but whether these pages were cut content or deliberately buried by the devs, one thing's for certain: what's been left behind is far too complete to ignore. And with that, we finally have the full narrative behind that which gave chase, or at least the parts the game was willing to show us. Anyway, I've spent weeks untangling this story, and if you're still watching, it means you cared enough to follow it to the end, so thank you. Also, I know I already mentioned it, but thank you again for 10,000 subscribers. Although by the time my slow ass gets around to getting this video out, we may have already hit 20k, which is just, I mean, it's truly unbelievable. Thank you guys so much for the support. It really means a lot to me. If you want to support more deep dive content like this, make sure you check out the Patreon, as that helps me spend more time on these longer projects. Or just drop a like, leave a comment, and hit subscribe. That's far more than enough. Anyways, I'll see you guys again later. More creepy stuff soon.